Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to this episode. This is really a thank you and a tribute and eulogy to the life of my father, Charles Kerr Lyons. I know many of you met my dad, and at least one of you even shared the same career as my dad out at sea, and in different circumstances many would have attended his funeral service, but as it was only myself and the immediate family. I want to thank all of you who contacted me personally with cards, emails, text messages that you would be praying for me. It's always good when people ask me to pray, but it's wonderful when I'm told that people are praying for me. So that was a great help. Reading all your messages about that support, those prayers were answered. I was able to preach upon Luke chapter 23, the two men on the cross hanging next to the Lord Jesus. And I've said from the pulpit, and I said to my family on my father's funeral, that the greatest conversation and the most important conversation anybody ever has is the last conversation. And that conversation's not with the doctor, the nurse, the son, the daughter, the husband or the wife, but it's with the resurrected Lord Jesus. And it only goes two ways. Either we converse with him as one of the thieves did, they conversed with him as a foe, and of course the other conversed with him as a friend. Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus replied, today you shall be with me in paradise. I told them that when I was very young, that was a verse my father used to quote to me. Today thou shalt be with me in paradise, because he used to quote the King James version of the Bible. I don't know if we both understood the full meaning of that passage back then, but now, as a man and as a Christian, I think I have a greater understanding of that passage and the great hope that for those who do converse with Christ as a friend at the end, that his grace reaches us even there, and Emmanuel's land becomes our eternal dwelling. So sit back, see these pictures, and if you've never met my father, this will be an introduction to who he was, and in some sense explains something of who I am. Thank you all once again for your support over these difficult days. God bless you all. My father's life was in two parts, so I'm going to speak about that now as best I can. His life before he met my mother and had me, and then his life after. He was born in September 1943 to James and Lucy Lyons. His two sisters were Josephine and Betty, and my dad, even from a young age, made no bones about it. His favourite was Betty. Now, his childhood was tough, but it was filled with action and adventure and mischief, and he also personally filled the White Inch Pond with many pairs of NHS glasses that he hated wearing as a young boy as well. He climbed roofs, trees, he played bugle in the Boys' Brigade, and he had a love for reading books, which is a passion that he passed on to me. He was intelligent at school, though sadly I have to say not always the best behaved at school. Now, he got the opportunity to be a greengrocer and to be trained at Cochrane's on how to cut meat and stock food and run a shop, but my dad thought that that was not manly enough for him. He wanted to go into the shipyard to learn how to build ships and be a man's man. Well, his Uncle Jock got him an apprenticeship in Sir Charles Connell's as a shipwright, where he could learn with heat and metal and shouting and draftsman's drawings, and of course other men, how to build ships that would sail all across the world. So when he was old enough, alongside this, he also joined 15 Para, and he spent several years jumping from planes, balloons, and running around the countryside carrying his rifle and full webbing. I asked him if he was ever scared of jumping out of a plane. Of course, Edward, he said, every single time. It's not natural, you know, to jump out of a plane. I said, but well, why did you do it? He said, well, I was more scared of the sergeant who was shouting at me, telling me to jump out of the plane. But once I was outside, it was absolutely magical. Upon gaining his trade after 5 years, he became a journeyman, and a fellow journeyman told him on the Clyde, "Don't stay here, Charlie. Take your trade and go to sea and encounter the world. So he joined the Merchant Navy, and he spent many years at sea as a chief petty officer. He sailed with companies like Blue Funnel, the Ben Line, Red Star, and did some work on RFA tankers. And along with the boatswains that he sailed with, he collected more adventures than you find in an average TV drama. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he'd been around the world 3 times at sea. He'd seen the Cape of Good Hope, he'd faced huge storms at sea, he'd broken down in the Pacific. He'd also lived in South Africa for a few years in between voyages. My father was always a well-dressed man. All his clothes were handmade by tailors in the Far East, and so no one here in the UK ever had clothes like him, because his clothes were made only ever to fit him. But it was when he was turning 30 that he came back to land, and it was a crucial time for him in his life. He said to me, I came back either to stay or to decide to go back to sea, and if I did that, Edward, I would never probably come back again. And that decision started the second half of my father's life. Standing at a door at a men's only meeting, and all I can say is my father belonged to a few organisations in Glasgow that really, they were men only groups and did that sort of thing. So he refused a young lady with her friends entry to the building that night because it was a meeting only for the men. But he must have left a nice impression upon her, because at an orange dance several weeks later, he asked her for the last dance and if he could walk her home, and she let him. And as he walked home and he saw the name on the door, he read it Johnston, and he said, Are you a relation to Robert Johnston? My mum says, Well, that's my oldest brother. Well, he said, You tell him that you've just met Charlie. To which my Uncle Robert replied, Oh, he met you at last. They were married in 1975 at St Mark's Church of Scotland, and he became a father to me in 1977. And Mum and me, we loved living with Dad, listening to his stories, going all over the world. By the time I was 8, I'd travelled the world as well. I'd seen other continents, heard other languages. I'd jumped from planes and balloons with a parachute. I'd fired the SLR and the Bren gun. I'd driven a car across the deserts of Africa where the road signs read, Beware of sleeping elephants. When we see elephants, they're usually in safari parks or zoos. When my father saw lions and elephants, they were running around out in the wild. I'd even learned to speak some Zulu, Wenafula Lapamanzi. What's that? I asked him. I want a glass of water, he replied. Oh, Dad, that's no very impressive, I says. He says, but it's very important, Edward, when you're in South Africa and it's very hot. When he came back to Glasgow when married and a father, he returned to the shipyards. And you know, every week he handed his pay packet into my mum on a Friday evening. And when the ships that he built were finished, he took them for their sea trials up and down the Clyde estuary. He was full of great wisdom, like, when you're old enough and anybody asks you in a pub what team you support, just tell them you support Partick Thistle, because you'll get plenty of sympathy and you'll never get any hassle. He had a soft spot for Partick Thistle, though he really loved the Glasgow Rangers. But I don't think his blood pressure loved the Glasgow Rangers quite as much as he did. He loved his books, and he did pass that on to me, and he loved simply being at home with my mum and me. Going shopping, we had to keep up with him because everything was like a route march. He ran everything to quite a tight timetable, and he hated being late for anything. He had a tool in his box for every single job imaginable, and if the council never did a job fast enough or good enough, he usually just did it himself, standing on the roof of the high-rise flats, 19 stories up and 27 Linkwood Crescent, hammering some lead back onto the roof that had been dislodged because of the wind, and the noise drove him mad. In life he supported everything I ever did, and I could tell my father anything, even the bad things. In time, he became a grandpa to Elizabeth Michael and Evangeline, and a father-in-law to Caroline. He loved the family because here was a new generation who could tell his stories to, and they loved the way he just said what he was thinking. My mother used to say he would get us hung for that. But it was amazing, really, that a man that had travelled the entire world several times in search of something, found all that he ever wanted, was really just at home in Glasgow, being a loving husband and a dad. And so at 77 years of age, he would not have had many regrets. He walked into my mum's life standing at a door, and he walked out of her life standing at a door. The last time she saw him, standing at the door waiting to go to his patient transport in order to go to the doctor and then on to hospital. "I hope you got on all right," my mother says. My dad just replied with his casual confidence, "Aye, all right." My father loved the regiment that he served in, the Paras, and he loved studying the battles of the Paras. But you know, though he loved the ones that they managed to win, he was very fascinated by one battle in particular that they lost. He spoke to me a great deal about it. It was the Battle of Arnhem Bridge, which is known as the Bridge Too Far. The Paras had landed with the intention of halting a German advance, and once they landed they realised that that would not be possible. The Germans had heavy artillery and panzer divisions sitting at the bridge, and Paras can't come in with tanks and trucks. They can only arrive with rifles and machine guns. So they decided all they would be able to do is fight on for as long as they possibly could. They fought on, they exceeded their expectations, but eventually they lost. When my father went in to Ward 5C of the Queen Elizabeth with COVID-19, that really was his Arnhem Bridge moment. I think he knew this will be about hanging on for as long as possible. And he did hang on, and we both, my mother and myself, got to have a vital last conversation with him and say everything that we could and everything that we wanted to say. After I'd thanked him for being a good father, I told him, "Now you put your trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, because he will speak to you far clearer than I've ever spoken to you. And you remember those choruses you sang as a boy and played the bugle for in the Boys Brigade, because Jesus will see you through." To which he just thanked me. So it is my hope that my father will have heard by Christ himself the verse he used to quote to me as a small child, "Today thou shalt be with me in paradise."
I am sailing home again, across the sea. I am sailing,